Marcus Chun had exactly 17 minutes to get his daughter to her violin lesson before rushing back to the construction site where his crew was waiting. The 1998 Ford pickup truck wheezed to life on the third try, its exhaust pipe announcing their departure with a sound that could wake the entire neighborhood. 6-year-old Emma buckled herself into the passenger seat, her small violin case balanced carefully on her lap. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dad, why does our truck sound like it's coughing? Emma asked, her innocent eyes reflecting genuine curiosity rather than embarrassment. Marcus glanced at his daughter through the rearview mirror and smiled. Sometimes old things make noise to remind us they're still working hard, sweetheart. The truck's paint had faded from forest green to something resembling weathered sage, with rust spots blooming along the wheel wells like autumn leaves. Passenger door required a specific technique lift, the handle while pulling, and the air conditioning had given up the ghost 3 summers ago. But it was paid for, and it got them where they needed to go. What Marcus didn't know was that in exactly 43 minutes, his carefully constructed world would collide with forces that would change everything he thought he knew about power, respect, and the dangerous assumptions people make about success. The Hartwell Academy of Fine Arts occupied a pristine corner of Westfield's most exclusive district, its limestone facade gleaming under the afternoon sun like a monument to old money and older traditions. Marcus had driven past this building countless times over the years, usually with a crew of workers heading to renovate one of the neighboring mansions. Today, he was here as a parent. Emma's violin teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had specifically requested that parents accompany their children to this particular lesson. There was going to be a brief presentation about the upcoming recital, and she wanted to discuss each student's progress individually. Marcus had rearranged his entire afternoon schedule, leaving his foreman Tommy in charge of the downtown renovation project. The parking lot told its own story about the academy's clientele. Sleek German sedans lined up beside pristine SUVs that had never seen a day of actual utility work. Marcus's truck looked like a refugee from a different era, its modest presence almost apologetic among the automotive aristocracy. "Ready for your lesson, Em?" Marcus asked, helping his daughter out of the truck. She nodded enthusiastically, her small hand gripping his calloused one. As they walked toward the building's imposing entrance, the lobby was all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, with oil paintings of stern-faced benefactors watching over the space like guards. Other parents clustered in small groups, their conversations a low murmur of private school names and vacation destinations. Marcus recognized the uniform of his social class immediately. He was the only person in work boots and a flannel shirt that bore the faint scent of sawdust and honest labor. Marcus Chun? A woman in her 50s approached them, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. "I'm Mrs. Patterson. Emma talks about you constantly." "All good things, I hope," Marcus replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, and her smile seemed genuine rather than polite. "She's very proud of her father," Mrs. Patterson said, kneeling to Emma's level. "Are you ready to show everyone what you've been practicing?" Emma beamed and nodded, clutching her violin case tighter. As they followed Mrs. Patterson toward the music room, Marcus couldn't help but notice the sidelong glances from other parents. He'd grown accustomed to being the only blue-collar father in these spaces, but it never became completely comfortable. The music room was smaller than Marcus had expected, with about 15 chairs arranged in a semicircle. Parents were already taking their seats while children prepared their instruments. Marcus chose a chair near the back, hoping to blend into the background while still being visible enough for Emma to see his encouraging smile. "Dad, sit closer," Emma whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "I want you to hear everything." Marcus moved to the third row, directly behind a woman in a cream-colored suit whose perfume was subtle but expensive. She turned slightly when he sat down, offering the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes before returning her attention to the front of the room. Mrs. Patterson began the session by explaining the recital format and discussing the pieces each student would perform. Emma was scheduled to play a simplified version of Bach's Minuet in G major, a challenging piece for someone her age. Marcus felt a surge of pride as he watched his daughter's focused expression while Mrs. Patterson demonstrated proper bow technique. The presentations began with each child taking turns at the front of the room. Marcus found himself genuinely impressed by the talent level, even among the youngest students. These kids had access to private lessons, high-quality instruments, and parents who could afford to prioritize artistic education. Emma held her own admirably, her performance earning genuine applause from the other parents. When the formal presentation ended, Mrs. Patterson invited parents to mingle while the children practiced in smaller groups. Marcus stood near the window, watching Emma work with two other students on a duet arrangement. The afternoon light caught the concentration on her face, and he felt that familiar mixture of love and worry that seemed to define single parenthood. "Your daughter has real talent," someone said beside him. Marcus turned to find a distinguished man in his early 50s, wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. "I'm Richard Blackwood. My son Trevor is in the advanced group. Marcus Chun," he replied, shaking the offered hand. "Emma's been working really hard on her piece." "It shows," Blackwood said, his tone conversational. "What do you do for work?" "Marcus? I own a construction company," Marcus answered. "Mostly residential renovations and custom builds." Something shifted in Blackwood's expression, subtle but unmistakable. "Ah, a contractor. That's honest work." The pause before honest carried just enough weight to make Marcus's jaw tighten slightly. He'd heard that tone before, the careful condescension of someone who considered manual labor a necessary evil performed by people who couldn't do anything better. "We do some commercial projects too," Marcus said evenly. "Just finished the renovation on the Meridian building downtown." "Really?" Blackwood's eyebrows rose with what might have been surprise or skepticism. "That's quite a project." "I heard the general contractor was Chun and Associates. That's my company." The admission seemed to confuse Blackwood, as if he couldn't reconcile Marcus's work clothes and truck with the scope of a multi-million-dollar commercial renovation. "I see. Well, it's good that you're able to support Emma's musical education. These lessons aren't cheap." Marcus felt the familiar burn of class-based assumptions. "Emma's education is my priority, always has been." Of course, Blackwood said, his tone now carrying that particular brand of false understanding that wealthy people deployed when they wanted to appear sympathetic to lesser circumstances. "It's admirable how you working-class parents make sacrifices for your children's opportunities." The phrase "working-class parents" hung in the air like a classification tag. Marcus had built his business from nothing, employed 12 people, and owned his home outright, but none of that seemed to register with Blackwood. All the man saw was the truck in the parking lot and the calluses on Marcus's hands. "We all make sacrifices for our children," Marcus replied carefully. "I imagine your work keeps you busy too." "Oh, I'm CEO of Pinnacle Financial Group," Blackwood sighed, the title dropping with practiced ease. "It's demanding, but the compensation allows us to provide Trevor with the best opportunities. Private schools, summer programs in Europe, that sort of thing." Marcus nodded politely, recognizing the subtle boast disguised as casual conversation. Pinnacle Financial Group was one of the largest investment firms in the city, and Blackwood's name occasionally appeared in the business section of the newspaper. The man was undoubtedly successful, but success hadn't taught him the difference between confidence and arrogance. "That's wonderful for Trevor," Marcus said. "Emma's happy with her public school, but I make sure she has music lessons and other activities." "Public school," Blackwood repeated, as if the words tasted unfamiliar. Well, I suppose that works for some families. Though I do worry about the quality of education these days. You really should consider private options if you can manage it. Financially. The suggestion carried an implicit assumption that Marcus couldn't afford private school, which was both wrong and insulting. Emma attended Roosevelt Elementary because it was an excellent school with dedicated teachers and strong arts programs. Marcus had researched every educational option in the district before making his choice. Emma's getting a great education. Where she is, Marcus said, his voice carrying a slight edge now. Her teachers are fantastic, and she's thriving academically and socially. I'm sure they do their best, Blackwood said with the kind of patronizing understanding that suggested public school teachers were admirable but limited. It's just that private institutions can offer so much more. The connections alone are worth the investment. Marcus found himself wondering if Blackwood realized how condescending he sounded, or if this was simply his natural mode of interaction with people he considered beneath his social station. Either way, the conversation was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. "Dad!" Emma's voice cut through the tension as she bounded over to them, her violin case swinging at her side. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm ready for the recital. Did you hear me? Play. Every note," Marcus said, his demeanor instantly warming as he knelt to Emma's level. "You sounded amazing, sweetheart." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Mr. Blackwood was just telling me about your playing," Blackwood said, addressing Emma, with the kind of exaggerated enthusiasm adults often used with children. "Your father must be very proud." "He is," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Dad says I'm going to be a famous musician someday, and he'll come to all my concerts." "Well, that's a lovely dream," Blackwood said, and Marcus caught the subtle emphasis on dream. "Though you'll want to make sure you have backup plans. The music industry is very competitive." Emma looked confused by the comment, but Marcus understood it perfectly. Blackwood was suggesting that a contractor's daughter shouldn't aim too high, that dreams of musical success were unrealistic for someone from her background. It was the kind of casual cruelty that wealthy people often inflicted without recognizing their own malice. "Emma can be whatever she wants to be," Marcus said firmly. "She's got the talent and the work ethic to succeed at anything she puts her." "Mine too. Of course, Blackwood said quickly. "I just meant that it's important to be realistic about these things. Not everyone can make it in the arts, regardless of talent." The conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Patterson's announcement that the session was ending. Parents began gathering their children and heading toward the exit, the polite murmur of goodbyes filling the room. Marcus was relieved to have an excuse to end his interaction with Blackwood. "It was interesting meeting you, Marcus," Blackwood said as they walked toward the lobby. "I hope Emma continues to enjoy her lessons." "She will," Marcus replied. "Music is important to her." "Well, as long as you can afford to keep it up," Blackwood said, the comment landing like a small barb. "These things can get expensive, especially if she wants to pursue it seriously." Marcus felt his patience finally wearing thin. "I'll make sure Emma has everything she needs." "I'm sure you'll do your best," Blackwood said, and somehow managed to make your best sound like a limitation rather than an effort. They reached the parking lot, where the afternoon sun was beginning to cast long shadows across the asphalt. Marcus helped Emma into the truck, making sure her violin case was secure before closing the door. When he turned around, he found Blackwood standing near a gleaming black Mercedes, his expression openly judgmental as he took in the truck's condition. "That's quite a vehicle," Blackwood said, his tone making it clear that quite was not a compliment. "How long have you had it?" "About 10 years, Marcus replied, not bothering to hide his irritation anymore. "It's reliable." "I'm sure it is," Blackwood said, though his expression suggested he doubted the truck's ability to make it out of the parking lot. "Though you might want to consider an upgrade." Image matters, especially when you're picking up your daughter from places like this. The suggestion that Marcus should be embarrassed by his truck, that it somehow reflected poorly on Emma, was the final straw. But before Marcus could respond, the sound of an approaching engine cut through the afternoon air. Both men turned to see a pristine white Rolls-Royce Phantom gliding into the parking lot with the silent elegance of a swan. The Rolls-Royce moved through the parking lot with the kind of authority that commanded attention without demanding it. Its chrome details caught the afternoon light like scattered diamonds, and the spirit of ecstasy hued ornament gleamed against the pristine white paint. Even among the collection of luxury vehicles, this car stood apart, not just expensive, but genuinely rare. Marcus watched the vehicle approach, genuinely curious about who might be driving such an extraordinary machine. Beside him, Blackwood's entire demeanor shifted. The condescending confidence that had defined their conversation evaporated, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like nervousness. "Excuse me," Blackwood muttered, suddenly fumbling for his phone. "I need to make a call." The Rolls-Royce came to a stop 3 spaces away from Marcus's truck, the contrast between the vehicles almost comical. The driver's door opened with the kind of solid, engineered precision that spoke of craftsmanship rather than mere manufacturing. A woman stepped out, her presence immediately commanding the space around her. She was tall and elegant, probably in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that somehow managed to look both professional and effortless. Her clothing was understated but clearly expensive dark jeans that fit perfectly, a cream-colored cashmere sweater, and leather boots that had probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But it wasn't her clothing that made her remarkable. It was the way she moved with complete confidence, as if she owned not just the space she occupied, but the very air around her. "Marcus?" she called out, her voice carrying easily across the parking lot. "Marcus Chun?" Marcus felt his world tilt slightly. He'd never seen this woman before in his life, yet she knew his name and was walking directly toward him with the kind of familiarity that suggested they were old friends. Emma pressed her face against the truck's window, equally curious about this unexpected development. "I'm sorry," Marcus said as the woman approached. "Do we know each other?" "Not yet," she replied, extending her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Victoria Ashford. I believe you know my husband." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Victoria Ashford, as in Ashford Holdings, the real estate empire that owned half the commercial buildings in the city. As in the Victoria Ashford who'd been featured on the cover of Forbes magazine 6 months ago as one of the most influential women in American business. As in the billionaire who'd started with a single apartment building and built it into a real estate dynasty worth over $3 billion. "Your husband?" Marcus managed, his mind struggling to process this information. "David Ashford," Victoria said, her smile widening slightly. "Though I think you might know him by a different name." Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place with devastating clarity. David Chun, the man who'd married Marcus's college girlfriend Sarah 15 years ago. The man who'd taken Sarah's last name when they divorced 3 years later, then kept using it professionally. The man who'd been sending child support payments for Emma through a legal firm, never once making direct contact. "David Chun," Marcus said quietly. "That's right," Victoria confirmed. "Though he's been David Ashford for the past 8 years now. We married shortly after his divorce was finalized." The revelation hit Marcus like a wave. The man he'd thought was some mid-level professional who'd made a mistake with Sarah was actually married to one of the wealthiest women in America. The modest child support payments that had been arriving monthly weren't coming from a struggling ex-boyfriend. They were coming from a man who could afford to buy and sell most businesses without thinking twice. "I don't understand," Marcus said, glancing toward his truck where Emma was watching the conversation with wide eyes. "Why are you here?" "Because David asked me to be," Victoria said simply. He's been wanting to meet Emma for years, but he wasn't sure how to approach the situation. When I saw you here today, I thought it might be the perfect opportunity. You saw me here? I dropped my stepson off for piano lessons every Tuesday, Victoria explained. I noticed your truck a few weeks ago. David had described it to me. When? I saw you with Emma today. I knew it had to be you. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the implications. David wants to meet Emma? Very much, Victoria said. He's been following her progress from a distance. The violin lessons, her school achievements, everything. He's incredibly proud of her. But he's never tried to contact us directly. He was afraid, Victoria said with surprising honesty. Afraid of disrupting the life you've built with Emma. Afraid of being rejected. David isn't good with emotional situations. He's much better with spreadsheets and business deals. Marcus glanced around the parking lot, suddenly aware that other parents were watching this conversation with undisguised curiosity. Blackwood had retreated to the far side of his Mercedes, his phone pressed to his ear, but Marcus could see him stealing glances in their direction. Mrs. Ashford, Marcus began, but Victoria interrupted him. Victoria, please. And I know this is a lot to process. I'm not here to pressure you into anything. I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know that David would very much like to be part of Emma's life, if you're comfortable with that. I need to think about this, Marcus said, his mind racing through years of assumptions and half-formed resentments. Emma doesn't really know about David. She knows her biological father isn't in the picture, but we've never discussed the details. Of course, Victoria said immediately. This is entirely your decision. David understands that you're Emma's father in every way that matters. He's not trying to replace you or disrupt your relationship with her. Then what does he want? To know her, Victoria said simply. To be her friend, if possible. To help support her dreams and ambitions. David never had children of his own before Emma, and finding out about her has been transformative for him. Marcus found himself studying Victoria's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But her expression was open and genuine, without the calculated friendliness he'd encountered from other wealthy people. She seemed to genuinely care about Emma's well-being rather than just fulfilling some obligation. How long have you known about Emma? Marcus asked. Since before David and I were married, Victoria replied. He told me about her on our third date. It was important to him that I understand he had a daughter, even if he wasn't actively involved in her life. And you were okay with that? I was impressed by it, Victoria said. David could have easily ignored his responsibilities, but he chose to support Emma financially, even though he'd never met her. That told me something important about his character. Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions, anger at years of assumptions, confusion about this new information, and something that might have been relief. The narrative he'd constructed about Emma's biological father was crumbling, replaced by something far more complex. Dad? Emma's voice came through the truck's partially open window. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, sweetheart, Marcus called back, though he wasn't sure that was true. Just talking to a friend. Actually, Victoria said, I was hoping I might meet Emma if that's all right with you. I've heard so much about her from David. Marcus hesitated. Introducing Emma to Victoria would make this situation real in a way that couldn't be undone. But looking at Victoria's expectant face, he found himself nodding. Emma, he called, would you like to come meet Mrs. Ashford? Emma scrambled out of the truck with the quick energy of a 6-year-old, her violin case forgotten in her excitement. She approached Victoria with the kind of open curiosity that children possessed before the Wava world taught them to be cautious. You have a really pretty car, Emma said, staring at the Rolls-Royce with obvious admiration. Thank you, Victoria said, kneeling to Emma's level. Your dad tells me you're learning to play the violin. I'm practicing Bach, Emma said proudly. It's really hard, but I'm getting better. "I'd love to hear you play sometime," Victoria said. "I play piano, so maybe we could play together." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? Dad, can we play music with Mrs. Ashford?" Marcus felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a casual conversation anymore. It was the beginning of something that would change Emma's life forever. But looking at his daughter's excited face, he realized that change wasn't necessarily a bad thing. "We'll see, Em," Marcus said carefully. "Mrs. Ashford is a very busy person." "Actually," Victoria said, standing up, "I'd be honored to play music with Emma any time. Music is one of the most important things in life. Do you have kids?" Emma asked with the directness that only children could manage. "I have a stepson," Victoria said. "He's 12 and he plays piano too. His name is Michael." "Maybe we could all play together," Emma suggested. "Like a family band." The word family hung in the air, carrying implications that Marcus wasn't ready to address. But Victoria handled it with grace, smiling at Emma without making any promises that weren't hers to make. "That sounds wonderful," Victoria said. "Music is always better when it's shared." Across the parking lot, Marcus noticed that Blackwood had ended his phone call and was now walking toward them with obvious reluctance. His earlier confidence had been replaced by something that looked like genuine anxiety. "Victoria," Blackwood said as he approached, his tone carefully neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Richard," Victoria replied, her own tone cooling noticeably. "I was just meeting Marcus and Emma." The interaction between Victoria and Blackwood was fascinating to watch. Blackwood's entire demeanor had shifted, from arrogant dismissal to careful deference. He stood straighter, spoke more formally, and seemed to be choosing his words with unusual care. "I didn't realize you knew the Chuns," Blackwood said, glancing nervously between Victoria and Marcus. "Marcus is family," Victoria said simply, and Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet once again. The casual way she claimed him as family, the protective edge in her voice when she spoke to Blackwood, it all suggested a level of loyalty that Marcus hadn't expected. "Family?" Blackwood repeated, his voice climbing slightly in pitch. "Emma is my stepdaughter," Victoria said, placing a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "And Marcus is one of the finest men I've ever had the pleasure to know." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. He'd been defending himself against Blackwood's casual cruelty for the past hour, but Victoria's simple statement of respect carried more weight than any argument he could have made. I didn't realize," Blackwood stammered, his face reddening. "Marcus, I hope you'll forgive me if I said anything inappropriate earlier." "What did you say to Marcus?" Victoria asked, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. "Nothing really," Blackwood said quickly. "Just casual conversation." "Richard was giving me advice about parenting and career choices," Marcus said carefully, "and suggesting I should upgrade my truck." Victoria's expression hardened. "Were you criticizing Marcus's truck, Richard?" "Not criticizing, exactly," Blackwood sighed, sweat beginning to appear on his forehead. "Just mentioning that image can be important in certain circumstances." "I see," Victoria said, her tone arctic. "And what's wrong with Marcus's truck?" "Nothing," Blackwood said desperately. "It's perfectly fine, practical, reliable. It's also paid for," Marcus added quietly, "and it gets us where we need to go." "Those are excellent qualities in a vehicle," Victoria said. "Much better than taking on unnecessary debt just to impress people who don't matter." The implied criticism of Blackwood's Mercedes was subtle but unmistakable. Marcus found himself fighting back a smile as he watched the CEO squirm under Victoria's steady gaze. "Of course," Blackwood said. "I completely agree. Financial responsibility is much more important than appearances. I'm glad we understand each other," Victoria said. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to continue my conversation with Marcus and Emma." Blackwood took the dismissal with visible relief, practically fleeing to his Mercedes. Marcus watched him go, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and pity. The man who'd spent the afternoon making assumptions about Marcus's worth had just been quietly demolished by someone who actually understood the difference between wealth and class. "I apologize for Richard," Victoria said once Blackwood was out of earshot. "He can be difficult. You know him well?" "Unfortunately," Victoria said with a slight smile. "He's been trying to get Pinnacle Financial approved as one of our investment advisors for the past 2 years. He's persistent, I'll give him that." Marcus realized that Victoria held Richard Blackwood's professional future in her hands. The man who'd been condescending to Marcus all afternoon was apparently dependent on Victoria's approval for his company's growth. "Will you approve him?" Marcus asked. "Not after today," Victoria said firmly. "We only work with people who share our values. Someone who would mock a single father for driving a practical vehicle doesn't meet our standards." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude mixed with something that might have been vindication. Victoria wasn't just defending him out of politeness. She was taking concrete action based on Blackwood's behavior. "You don't have to do that," Marcus said. "I can handle people like Blackwood." "I know you can," Victoria said. "But why should you have to? Life is too short to do business with people who treat others poorly." Emma, who had been listening to this conversation with the intense focus that children brought to adult drama, suddenly spoke up. "Are you really my stepmom?" she asked Victoria. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria looked at Marcus, clearly recognizing that her answer would have profound implications for everyone involved. "That's complicated, sweetheart," Victoria said carefully. "Your biological father is my husband, which technically makes us family. But Marcus is your dad, and he's the one who makes all the important decisions about your life. Can I have 2 dads and a stepmom?" Emma asked, with the kind of logical directness that only children possessed. "What do you think about that?" Victoria asked, deflecting the question back to Emma. "I think it sounds pretty cool," Emma said, "especially if my stepmom drives a really fancy car." Victoria laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her entire face. "Well, I do have a nice car. And I'd love to take you for a ride sometime, if your dad says it's okay." Marcus found himself at a crossroads. He could maintain the status quo, keep his life simple and predictable, and continue raising Emma without the complications that David's family would inevitably bring. Or he could open the door to something new and uncertain, something that might give Emma opportunities he could never provide on his own. Looking at his daughter's excited face, the decision felt inevitable. The decision Marcus faced wasn't just about allowing Victoria into their lives, it was about fundamentally altering the story he'd been telling himself about Emma's origins for 6 years. Every assumption he'd made, every bitter thought he'd harbored about David's absence, was crumbling under the weight of new information. "Mrs. Ashford," Marcus began, then caught himself. "Victoria, I need to ask you something directly, of course." "Why?" "Now, Emma's 6 years old. David's had plenty of opportunities to reach out before this." Victoria's expression grew thoughtful. "The honest answer is that David was afraid. Not of you, necessarily, but of the situation. He was 22 when Emma was born, barely out of college, and he panicked. By the time he realized he wanted to be involved, he was convinced he'd waited too long." "And you changed his mind?" "I helped him understand that it's never too late to do the right thing," Victoria said, "but the decision was entirely his. He's been researching Emma's school, her interests, her achievements. He has a photo of her on his desk at work." Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to be angry about the years of absence, but another part recognized something familiar in David's fear. Single parenthood was terrifying even when you were actively involved. He could only imagine how overwhelming it would be from a distance. "What does he want from us?" Marcus asked. "Nothing that would threaten your relationship with Emma," Victoria said immediately. "David understands that you're her father." He's not trying to replace you or claim equal rights. He just wants to be part of her life in whatever way feels comfortable for everyone involved. Emma, who had been examining the Rolls-Royce with the focused attention of a potential car thief, suddenly looked up. "Can I see inside the fancy car?" Victoria smiled. "Of course. Would you like to sit in the driver's seat? Really?" Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "If it's okay with your dad," Victoria said, glancing at Marcus for permission. Marcus nodded, finding himself curious about Victoria's interaction with his daughter. He watched as Victoria opened the driver's door and helped Emma climb into the seat, adjusting it so she could reach the steering wheel. "Wow," Emma breathed, her hands gripping the leather-wrapped wheel. "This is like a spaceship." "It does have a lot of buttons," Victoria agreed, leaning into the car to show Emma the various controls. "This one adjusts the seat. This one controls the music, and this one makes the windows go up and down." Marcus found himself studying Victoria's face as she interacted with Emma. There was no condescension, no adult-to-child performance. She was genuinely enjoying Emma's excitement, answering her questions with patience and enthusiasm. "Does it fly?" Emma asked seriously. "Not yet," Victoria said with equal seriousness. "But the engineers are working on it." Emma giggled at the response, and Marcus felt something in his chest relax. Victoria wasn't trying to buy Emma's affection or overwhelm her with expensive gifts. She was simply being present and engaged, which was more than many adults managed with children. "Dad, come look at this," Emma called out, waving him over to the car. Marcus approached the Rolls-Royce, noting the impeccable craftsmanship even in the details most people would never notice. The interior was cream-colored leather with wood accents that looked like they'd been carved by master craftsmen. It was beautiful, but in a way that spoke of quality rather than ostentation. "Pretty nice, huh?" Marcus said, running his hand along the doorframe. "It's amazing," Emma said. "Victoria, how fast does it go?" "Fast enough to get us wherever we need to go safely," Victoria replied diplomatically. "But the real magic is how quiet it is. You can barely hear the engine." "Our truck is the opposite," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You can hear it from 3 blocks away." Marcus felt a flash of embarrassment, but Victoria's response surprised him. "That's because your truck is working hard," Victoria said. "It's carried you and your dad all over the city, helped him build his business, and taken you to violin lessons in school every day. That's a lot of responsibility for one vehicle." "I never thought about it that way," Emma said, looking thoughtful. "The best machines are the ones that do their job reliably," Victoria continued. "Your truck has been taking care of your family for years. That's much more impressive than being shiny and new." Marcus felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. In one simple explanation, Victoria had reframed Emma's perception of their truck from something potentially embarrassing to something worthy of respect. It was a kindness that he would remember for years. "Can we give Victoria a ride in our truck?" Emma asked suddenly, "so she can see how it works?" Marcus nearly choked on his own saliva. I don't think I'd be honored," Victoria said without hesitation. "I've never ridden in a 1998 Ford pickup." "You don't have to," Marcus said quickly. "Emma doesn't understand, Marcus," Victoria interrupted gently. "I'd genuinely like to experience your truck." "Emma's right. I should understand how it works." The idea of Victoria Ashford, billionaire real estate mogul, riding in his beat-up pickup truck was almost surreal. But looking at Emma's excited face, Marcus found himself nodding. "All right," he said. "But don't say I didn't warn you about the air conditioning," Victoria laughed. "I think I'll survive." They made the transfer from the Rolls-Royce to the pickup truck, Emma chattering excitedly about the differences between the two vehicles. Victoria had to master the passenger door's particular opening technique, but she handled it with good humor rather than frustration. "This is cozy," Victoria said as she settled into the worn passenger seat. "I can see why Emma likes it." It's our adventure truck, Emma announced from her position in the middle. We've been everywhere in it. Marcus started the engine, which responded with its characteristic wheeze and rumble. He found himself hyper-aware of every rattle, every sign, of the truck's age and wear. But Victoria seemed genuinely fascinated by the experience. "This has character," she said as they pulled out of the parking lot. "Modern cars are so sanitized. They don't tell you anything about their history. This one definitely has stories." Marcus agreed, relaxing slightly. "I bought it when Emma was a baby. It's been our constant companion ever since." "Tell me about Chun and Associates," Victoria said as they drove through the quiet suburban streets. "How did you build the business?" Marcus found himself talking about his company in ways he rarely did with strangers. He described the early days, when he was working alone, taking on small residential projects and slowly building a reputation for quality work. He explained how he'd gradually expanded, hiring employees and taking on larger contracts. "The Meridian building was our biggest project," Marcus said. "Took 2 years to complete, but it established us as a serious commercial contractor." "I know that building," Victoria said with interest. "The renovation was exceptional. The historical preservation work was particularly impressive. You've seen it?" "I own the building next door," Victoria said casually. "I've been watching your progress for months. The craftsmanship is extraordinary." Marcus felt a surge of pride. Victoria wasn't just being polite. She was a real estate professional who understood construction quality. Her praise carried weight. "We take pride in our work," Marcus said. "Every project reflects on our reputation. It shows," Victoria said. "David would be impressed. He's always been fascinated by people who build things with their hands." The mention of David brought the conversation back to the central issue. Marcus glanced at Emma, who was listening intently to every word, and realized they needed to address the elephant in the room. "Emma," Marcus said carefully, "do you remember when we talked about how some families are different from others?" "You mean how some kids live with both parents and some live with just one?" Emma asked. "That's right. Well, Victoria is married to your biological father. That's why she wanted to meet you." Emma processed this information with the serious consideration she gave to all important matters. "So David is like my other dad?" "In a way," Marcus said, "but I'm still your dad." "That won't ever change. So I have 2 dads now?" Emma asked, her voice brightening with excitement. "If you want to think of it that way," Marcus said carefully. "Cool," Emma said with characteristic 6-year-old directness. "Does that mean I get twice as many birthday presents?" Victoria laughed. "I think we can work something out." They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Marcus was grappling with the implications of opening his carefully constructed life to new complications. Victoria seemed to understand his hesitation. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I want you to know that David has enormous respect for what you've accomplished with Emma. He's never presumed to have any claim on her beyond biology." "What does he want from this relationship?" Marcus asked. "To know her," Victoria said simply. "To be a positive influence in her life, to help support her dreams and ambitions." David never had a family growing up. He aged out of foster care at 18. The idea of having a daughter, even when he's not actively raising, means everything to him. The revelation that David had grown up in foster care reframed everything Marcus thought he knew about the man. It explained the fear of emotional connection, the hesitation to intrude on Marcus's relationship with Emma. David wasn't an absent father by choice. He was a man who'd never learned how to be part of a family. "He grew up in foster care?" Marcus asked. "Multiple homes," Victoria confirmed. "He was never adopted, never experienced stable family relationships. When he found out about Emma, he was terrified of doing the wrong thing." Marcus felt his anger at David's absence begin to transform into something more complicated. He understood fear, understood the paralysis that came from not knowing how to navigate emotional territory. David's distance wasn't cruel indifference, it was self-protection. "How did you two meet?" Marcus asked. "At a charity gala," Victoria said. "I was bored out of my mind, and David was hiding in a corner, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. We started talking about architecture, and I realized he was the most interesting person in the room. And he told you about Emma?" "Eventually." He was carrying around this enormous guilt about not being involved in her life. I helped him understand that guilt was useless unless he was willing to act on it. They pulled into the driveway of Marcus's house, a modest 2-story colonial inn. A middle-class neighborhood. The house was well-maintained but clearly lived in, with a small front yard and a vegetable garden visible in the backyard. "This is perfect," Victoria said, studying the house with genuine appreciation. "It looks like a home where people actually live." "Dad built my treehouse," Emma announced, pointing to an elaborate structure in the backyard oak tree. "Want to see it?" "I'd love to," Victoria said. They climbed out of the truck, and Marcus found himself seeing his property through Victoria's eyes. The house was modest by her standards, but it was clean, well-maintained, and filled with evidence of a life well-lived. Emma's bicycle leaned against the garage wall. Her chalk drawings decorated the driveway, and the swing set Marcus had built last summer occupied a corner of the backyard. "You built all this?" Victoria asked, taking in the various improvements Marcus had made over the years. "Most of it," Marcus said. "The deck, the treehouse, the garden beds. I like working with my hands. It shows," Victoria said. "This is what a real home looks like." Emma led them to the backyard, chattering about the treehouse's various features. Marcus had spent weeks building it, incorporating Emma's suggestions and creating something that was both safe and adventurous. It was probably the project he was most proud of, even more than the commercial buildings. "Can Victoria come up to the treehouse?" Emma asked. "If she wants to," Marcus said, wondering if Victoria's expensive clothes were suitable for tree climbing. "I haven't been in a treehouse in 20 years, Victoria said, kicking off her leather boots. "This should be interesting." Marcus watched with amazement as Victoria Ashford, one of the most powerful women in American business, climbed into his daughter's treehouse wearing expensive jeans and a cashmere sweater. She navigated the ladder with surprising grace, settling into the small space with Emma as if she'd been doing it all her life. "This is incredible." Victoria's voice drifted down from the treehouse. "Emma, your dad is an amazing builder." "He builds everything," Emma said proudly. "He says if you can imagine it, you can build it." Marcus felt a warm glow of pride at his daughter's words. He'd worked hard to create a world where Emma felt secure and loved, where she believed in her own potential and understood the value of hard work. Hearing her articulate those lessons to Victoria validated every sacrifice he'd made. "That's excellent advice," Victoria said. "I wish more people understood that." Looking up at the treehouse, watching Victoria interact with Emma in the space he'd created with his own hands, Marcus felt something shift inside him. This wasn't about David's absence or Victoria's wealth or his own insecurities. This was about Emma and what would make her life richer and more complete. Maybe it was time to stop protecting his daughter from complications and start preparing her for opportunities. The sound of Emma's laughter drifting down from the treehouse made Marcus's decision for him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard her sound so carefree, so genuinely delighted. Victoria wasn't performing for Emma or trying to impress her. She was simply enjoying a moment of childhood wonder that her wealth and status couldn't buy. "Dad," Emma called down. "Victoria wants to know if you'll show her the workshop." Marcus looked up at the treehouse, where Victoria's head was visible through the small window Emma had insisted on including in the design. "You want to see where I build things? If you don't mind," Victoria called back. "Emma says you make furniture too." Just small projects, Marcus said, but he found himself walking toward the detached garage that served as his workshop. Come down when you're ready. The workshop was Marcus's sanctuary, the place where he went to think and create when the world became too complicated. It was organized chaos, tools arranged according to a system only he understood, lumber stacked against one wall, and half-finished projects occupying every available surface. The smell of sawdust and wood stain permeated everything. Victoria and Emma climbed down from the treehouse, Emma chattering about all the things Marcus had built for her over the years. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she understood the difference between mass-produced furniture and handcrafted pieces. This is where the magic happens, Marcus said, opening the workshop door. Fair warning, it's not exactly showroom ready. Victoria stepped into the workshop and went completely still. Her eyes moved slowly across the space, taking in the collection of hand tools, the workbench worn smooth by years of use, and the various projects in different stages of completion. My God, she whispered, this is incredible. It's just a hobby workshop, Marcus said, suddenly self-conscious about the space's humble appearance. No, Victoria said firmly. This is an artist's studio. She approached the workbench where Marcus was currently working on a jewelry box for Emma's upcoming birthday. The piece was made from cherry wood, with intricate joinery that had taken him weeks to perfect. Victoria examined it with the careful attention of someone who understood craftsmanship. You made this? She asked, running her finger along the seamless joints. Still working on it, Marcus said. It's for Emma's 7th birthday next month. The dovetail joints are perfect, Victoria said with genuine admiration. Where did you learn to work wood like this? My grandfather, Marcus said. He was a cabinet maker. Spent summers with him learning traditional techniques. Victoria moved through the workshop like she was touring a museum, examining each tool and project with respectful attention. She paused at a dining table that Marcus had been restoring for a client, running her hand along the refinished surface. This is museum-quality work, she said. You could be charging 10 times what you probably are. It's not about the money. Marcus said, I like bringing old things back to life. That's exactly what I mean, Victoria said, turning to face him. You understand that some things are worth preserving, worth the time and effort it takes to do them right. That's becoming a rare quality. Emma had climbed onto Marcus's workbench and was examining the jewelry box with the proprietary interest of its intended recipient. Is this really for me? If you promise to take good care of it, Marcus said. I promise, Emma said solemnly. Can I put my violin music in it? That's exactly what it's for, Marcus said. Victoria watched this exchange with an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read. There was something almost wistful in her eyes, as if she was seeing something she'd never experienced before. You're very lucky, Emma, Victoria said quietly. Not everyone has a father who builds them treasures with his own hands. I know, Emma said matter-of-factly. Dad makes the best stuff. The simple confidence in Emma's voice hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd spent so many years worrying about what he couldn't provide for her: private schools, expensive vacations, designer clothes, that he'd sometimes forgotten to appreciate what he could give her. Love, attention, handmade treasures, and the security of knowing she was the most important thing in his world. Victoria, Marcus said, making the decision that had been building all afternoon. Would you like to stay for dinner? Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but you're welcome to join us. Victoria's face lit up with genuine pleasure. I'd love that. Should I call David? He could join us. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with nerves, but looking at Emma's excited face, he knew there was only one answer. Yes, he said, call David. Victoria pulled out her phone, stepping away slightly for privacy. Marcus could hear her side of the conversation, her voice warm and encouraging as she explained the situation to her husband. Emma bounced on her toes with excitement, already planning what she would show her other dad. "He's on his way," Victoria sighed, returning to where Marcus and Emma stood. "He's nervous but excited. What should I call him?" Emma asked. "I can't call him Dad because that's what I call Dad. What would you like to call him?" Victoria asked. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important decisions. "Maybe David, or maybe Papa David. I think he'd like either of those," Victoria said. Marcus felt a pang of something that might have been jealousy, but it was quickly replaced by a more complex emotion. Emma was excited about meeting David, but she wasn't confused about who her father was. Marcus's place in her life was secure, unshakable. This wasn't about replacement, it was about addition. "Let's go inside and start dinner," Marcus said. "David should be here by the time we're ready to eat." They moved into the house, Emma giving Victoria a comprehensive tour that included every room, closet, and hiding place. Victoria admired Emma's bedroom with its collection of stuffed animals and violin music scattered across the desk. She examined the refrigerator gallery of Emma's artwork and school achievements. She noticed the framed photo of Marcus and Emma at last year's father-daughter dance, both of them grinning at the camera in their formal clothes. "You two have a beautiful life together," Victoria said as they reached the kitchen. "We've been lucky," Marcus said, starting the preparations for dinner. "Emma's an easy kid to love." "That's not luck," Victoria said. "That's good parenting." Marcus felt a warm glow at the compliment. He'd made so many decisions as a single father based on instinct and hope, never sure if he was doing the right thing. Having someone like Victoria recognize his efforts meant more than he could express. The doorbell rang 45 minutes later, just as Marcus was draining the pasta. Emma shot toward the front door like a rocket, but Marcus caught her arm gently. "Remember what we talked about," he said. "David might be nervous too." Emma nodded solemnly and walked to the door with exaggerated dignity. Marcus followed, his heart pounding with an intensity that surprised him. This moment would change everything, and there was no going back. David Ashford stood on the front porch holding a bouquet of flowers and looking like he might bolt at any second. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and Emma's eyes. The resemblance between father and daughter was unmistakable, but more striking was the nervous energy radiating from the man who'd built a successful career by remaining calm under pressure. "Hello, Emma," David said, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm David." "I know," Emma said, studying him with frank curiosity. "You look like me." "I was thinking the same thing," David said, a smile breaking across his face. "Those are definitely my eyes and my stubborn chin," Marcus added, stepping forward. "David, I'm Marcus. Thank you for coming." The two men shook hands, each taking the measure of the other. David was clearly nervous, but there was genuine gratitude in his expression. Marcus found himself studying the man who'd been absent from Emma's life, looking for signs of weakness or selfishness. Instead, he saw someone who was genuinely overwhelmed by the opportunity to meet his daughter. "These are for you," David said, offering the flowers to Emma. "I wasn't sure what 6-year-olds like." "I like flowers," Emma said, accepting the bouquet. "With ceremony, they're pretty. Mom used to bring me flowers sometimes." The mention of Sarah created a moment of awkward silence. Marcus realized that David probably knew very little about Emma's life beyond the basic facts, including the fact that Sarah had died in a car accident when Emma was 4. Sarah was Emma's mom, Marcus explained quietly. "She passed away 2 years ago." David's face went pale. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry." "It's okay," Emma said with the matter-of-fact acceptance that children brought to difficult subjects. "I miss her, but Dad takes really good care of me." "I can see that," David said, his voice thick with emotion. They moved into the house. David taking in the comfortable chaos of a home where a child was genuinely loved. Emma led him through the same tour she'd given Victoria, pointing out her favorite books, her violin, and the various projects Marcus had built for her. "You built all this?" David asked Marcus as they examined the treehouse through the kitchen window. "Dad builds everything," Emma said proudly. "He's teaching me how to use tools." "Really?" David said, his interest clearly genuine. "What have you learned?" "How to measure twice and cut once," Emma recited, "and how to sand with the grain, and how to be patient because good things take time." David looked at Marcus with something that might have been envy. "Those are excellent lessons." "She's a quick learner," Marcus said. "Wants to help with every project." They sat down to dinner, the conversation flowing more easily than Marcus had expected. David asked thoughtful questions about Emma's school, her friends, and her interests. He listened to her play a simplified version of her recital piece, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. He admired her artwork and asked about her favorite subjects. But what impressed Marcus most was how David included him in every conversation. He didn't try to establish a separate relationship with Emma that excluded Marcus. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in understanding the life Marcus had built for their daughter. "Marcus, Victoria tells me you renovated the Meridian building," David said over dessert. "That's incredibly impressive work." "You know the building?" Marcus asked. "I designed the financing structure for the original purchase," David said. "It was a challenging project. The historical preservation requirements made it much more complex than a typical renovation." Marcus found himself engaging in a detailed discussion about the technical challenges of the renovation, the historical research required, and the innovative solutions his team had developed. David listened with the attention of someone who understood both the financial and practical complexities of major construction projects. "You should be proud of that work," David said. "Projects like that are what make cities worth living in." "Thank you," Marcus said, feeling a genuine connection forming with this man who'd been a stranger an hour ago. As the evening progressed, Marcus began to understand why Victoria had fallen in love with David. Beneath the nervous exterior was someone who was genuinely interested in other people, who asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully to the answers. He wasn't trying to buy Emma's affection or compete with Marcus for her attention. He was simply trying to understand who she was and how he might fit into her life. "Emma," David said as they finished dinner, "I know this is all new and probably confusing. I want you to know that I'm not trying to replace your dad or change anything about your life. I just hope we can be friends." "I'd like that," Emma said seriously. "Can you teach me stuff too? What would you like to learn?" David asked. "Maybe how money works?" Emma said. "Dad says you're good with numbers," David laughed. "I am good with numbers, and I'd be happy to teach you about money. And maybe you could learn how to build things," Emma suggested. "Dad could teach you." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion as he watched his daughter try to create connections between the two most important men in her life. She wasn't choosing sides or playing favorites. She was simply trying to expand her world to include everyone she cared about. "I'd like that very much," David said, looking at Marcus hopefully. "We'll see," Marcus said, but his tone was warm, rather than dismissive. As the evening wound down, Marcus realized that his fears about David's involvement had been largely unfounded. This wasn't about disruption or competition. It was about giving Emma access to more people who loved her, more opportunities to grow and learn, and more resources to pursue her dreams. The sound of Emma's laughter as David told her stories about his own childhood filled the house with a warmth that Marcus hadn't realized was missing. This was what family could look like when people approached it with genuine care and respect for each other, maybe opening their carefully constructed world to new complications. Wasn't something to fear, maybe it was something to celebrate. 3 weeks after that first dinner, Marcus found himself sitting in the lobby of Ashford Holdings. wearing his best suit and trying not to fidget with his tie. Victoria had invited him to lunch, claiming she wanted to discuss a business proposition. But Marcus suspected there was more to it than that. The Ashford Holdings building was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all glass and steel reaching 30 stories into the downtown sky. The lobby alone was larger than Marcus's entire house, with marble floors that reflected the afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. It was the kind of space designed to intimidate, to make visitors understand exactly how powerful the people upstairs really were. "Mr. Chun?" A young woman in an expensive suit approached him. "Ms. Ashford will see you now." The elevator ride to the 28th floor was silent except for the nearly inaudible hum of perfectly calibrated machinery. When the doors opened, Marcus stepped into a reception area that looked like it belonged in an art museum rather than an office building. Victoria's office occupied a corner of the building, with windows offering panoramic views of the city. But what struck Marcus most wasn't the view. It was the wall of photographs showing construction projects in various stages of completion. Victoria wasn't just a financial investor. She was someone who understood the physical process of building. "Marcus," Victoria said, rising from behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of mahogany. "Thank you for coming. How's Emma?" "Excited about her recital next week," Marcus said. "She's been practicing nonstop." "David's looking forward to it," Victoria said. "He's already cleared his calendar." The past 3 weeks had been a period of careful integration. David had visited twice more, each time growing more comfortable with Emma and more respectful of Marcus's role as her primary parent. They'd established a routine of Saturday afternoon visits, where David would take Emma to museums or parks while Marcus worked on weekend projects. It was working well, but Marcus still felt like they were all navigating uncharted territory. "You mentioned a business proposition," Marcus said, settling into one of the leather chairs facing Victoria's desk. "I did," Victoria said, moving to join him in the sitting area rather than remaining behind her desk. "I have a project that might interest you." She handed him a thick folder filled with architectural drawings and project specifications. Marcus opened it and felt his breath catch. The plans showed a mixed-use development unlike anything he'd ever seen: residential units, commercial space, and community areas all integrated into a single cohesive design. "This is incredible," Marcus said, studying the drawings. "Where is it going to be built?" "The old Riverside Industrial District," Victoria said. 15 acres of abandoned warehouses and contaminated land that the city's been trying to redevelop for a decade. Marcus knew the area well. It was a wasteland of crumbling buildings and empty lots, the kind of urban blight that developers usually avoided. But the plans in his hands showed how it could be transformed into something extraordinary. "The environmental cleanup alone must cost millions," Marcus said. 12 million, to be exact, Victoria confirmed. "Plus another 40 million for construction. It's not a project for the faint of heart." Marcus continued studying the plans, his mind automatically calculating the complexities involved. This wasn't just construction, it was urban renewal on a massive scale. The kind of project that could define a contractor's entire career. "Why are you showing me this?" Marcus asked. "Because I want Chun and Associates to be the general contractor," Victoria said simply. Marcus nearly dropped the folder. "You want my company to manage a $50 million development?" "I want your company to build a community," Victoria corrected. "There's a difference." "Victoria, this is incredible, but my company isn't equipped for a project this size. We'd need to expand dramatically, bring in specialized subcontractors, hire project managers with experience we don't have. All of which can be arranged," Victoria said. "What I can't arrange is finding another contractor who approaches their work the way you do." "What do you mean?" Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "Most contractors see buildings as commodities. They're focused on profit margins and construction schedules. You see buildings as places where people will live their lives. Marcus felt a surge of pride at the assessment, but also a healthy dose of fear. Victoria, if something went wrong on a project this size, it could destroy my company. And if something goes right, it could establish Chun and Associates as one of the premier construction firms in the region. Victoria countered. But more importantly, it could create affordable housing for families who are being priced out of the city. Marcus looked at the plans again, this time focusing on the residential component. The units weren't luxury condos designed for wealthy buyers. They were thoughtfully designed homes for working families. Teachers, firefighters, nurses, contractors like himself. People who formed the backbone of the city but couldn't afford to live in it anymore. The profit margins must be terrible, Marcus said. They are, Victoria agreed. This isn't about maximizing return on investment. It's about creating something meaningful. Then why do it? Victoria returned to her chair, her expression serious. Because David and I have more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. Because Emma is going to inherit a world that we're helping to shape. Because someone needs to prove that development can be about community building rather than just wealth extraction. Marcus felt the weight of the opportunity settling on his shoulders. This project could transform his business, but it could also overwhelm it. He'd built Chun and Associates carefully, taking on projects he knew his team could handle well. This would be a leap into territory where failure could mean losing everything he'd worked for. I need time to think about this, Marcus said. Of course, Victoria said. But I should mention that the City Council is voting on the development proposal next month. If we're going to move forward, we need to have our team in place. Who else is involved? Harrington and Associates is handling the architectural work, Victoria said. They designed the affordable housing complex that won the AIA Gold Medal last year. Chun and Associates would be working with the best in the business. Marcus recognized the firm's name. Harrington and Associates was legendary in sustainable design, the kind of architectural practice that created buildings featured in international magazines. The idea of working with them was both thrilling and terrifying. Victoria, can I ask you something directly? Always. Is this offer connected to Emma? To David wanting to be part of her life? Victoria's expression grew thoughtful. That's a fair question. The honest answer is that knowing you influenced my decision to approach Chun and Associates for this project. But I wouldn't risk $50 million on a contractor I didn't believe was capable of exceptional work. So if things don't work out with David and Emma, the business relationship would continue based on its own merits, Victoria said firmly. I don't mix family and business in ways that could hurt either. Marcus felt some of his tension ease. Victoria wasn't trying to buy his cooperation or create obligations that would complicate their family dynamics. She was offering him a legitimate business opportunity based on his professional reputation. Can I take these plans home to study them? Marcus asked. They're yours, Victoria said. Along with the environmental reports, the financing structure, and the preliminary construction timeline. Marcus gathered the documents, his mind already racing through the implications. This project would require him to hire at least 20 new employees, lease additional equipment, and establish relationships with subcontractors he'd never worked with before. It would also put Chun and Associates on the map as a major commercial developer. There's one more thing, Victoria said as Marcus prepared to leave. Richard Blackwood has been calling my office. The mention of Blackwood's name made Marcus's stomach tighten. He'd managed to avoid thinking about the arrogant CEO since their encounter at the music academy. What does he want? To apologize for his behavior at the academy, Victoria said. Apparently, he's done some research and discovered that Chun and Associates built several high-profile projects in the city. And now he wants to make amends? He wants to secure Pinnacle Financial's position as our investment advisor, Victoria said with a slight smile. Amazing how quickly people's attitudes change when they realize they've misjudged someone's importance. Marcus found himself curious about Blackwood's research. What did he find out? That Chun & Associates has a stellar reputation for quality work and on-time delivery. That you've never had a major safety incident or cost overrun. That several of your clients have specifically requested you for follow-up projects. He could have learned all that by asking me directly instead of making assumptions based on my truck, Marcus said. Some people only value information they have to work for, Victoria said. Blackwood is learning an expensive lesson about the dangers of superficial judgments. Are you going to work with Pinnacle Financial? Not a chance. Victoria said. We have excellent investment advisors who share our values. We don't need to work with people who mock single fathers for driving practical vehicles. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude mixed with something that might have been vindication. Blackwood's condescension had real consequences, professional costs, that extended far beyond hurt feelings. Victoria, Marcus said, thank you for standing up to Blackwood, for this opportunity, for everything you've done for Emma. Thank you for giving David a chance to get to know his daughter, Victoria replied. And for raising such an extraordinary little girl. Marcus left the Ashford Holdings building with his head spinning from the possibilities and challenges ahead. The project documents felt heavy in his hands, weighted with potential futures he'd never imagined. But as he walked to his truck, he found himself thinking not about construction schedules or profit margins, but about the families who might live in the homes he could build. The drive home took him through the Riverside Industrial District, past the abandoned warehouses and empty lots that could become something beautiful and meaningful. He pulled over and sat in his truck, studying the land with new eyes. This wasn't just a construction project, it was an opportunity to create a community where families like his own could thrive. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad, David is coming to my recital. He said he's never heard live violin music before. Marcus smiled at his daughter's excitement. 3 weeks ago, Emma had been a little girl with one father and a simple life. Now she was part of an extended family that included a stepmother who drove a Rolls-Royce and a biological father who was learning to appreciate classical music. The changes could have been overwhelming, but Emma was adapting with the resilience that children possessed when adults handled transitions with care and respect. Another text arrived. This one from David. Marcus, thank you for letting me be part of Emma's life. I know I can never make up for lost time, but I promise to be worthy of this second chance. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment before responding. We're all figuring this out together. Emma is lucky to have so many people who love her. As he drove home, Marcus thought about the choices ahead of him. The Riverside project would be the biggest risk he'd ever taken, but it could also be the most meaningful work of his career. Emma's recital would be the first time their newly expanded family appeared together in public, a statement about who they were becoming. 6 months ago, Marcus had been a single father focused on providing stability and security for his daughter. Now he was part of something larger and more complex, with opportunities and responsibilities he'd never imagined. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities that extended far beyond anything he could have created on his own. Some risks, Marcus realized, were worth taking. Some complications led to better outcomes than the safety of staying small. And some families formed in ways that defied conventional expectations, but created stronger bonds than traditional structures ever could. Emma was waiting for him when he got home, her violin case open on the kitchen table as she practiced scales with the focused determination of someone preparing for her debut performance. She looked up when he entered, her face bright with excitement about the recital and curiosity about his afternoon. How was your meeting with Victoria? She asked. Interesting, Marcus said. Very interesting. Are you going to work together? Marcus looked at his daughter, this remarkable little girl who'd somehow become the center of a family that included a billionaire real estate mogul, a nervous father learning to love from a distance, and a contractor who was about to take the biggest professional risk of his life. "I think we might," he said. "What would you think about that?" "I think it would be cool," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Victoria is really nice, and she likes the same music I do." Marcus laughed at his daughter's practical approach to complex family dynamics. To Emma, the important question wasn't about business arrangements or social status. It was about whether people were kind, and whether they shared her interests, maybe. That was the right way to approach all of life's complicated decisions. Not with elaborate risk assessments or detailed contingency plans, but with simple questions about character and connection. The Riverside Project documents sat on the kitchen counter, full of technical specifications and financial projections. But the real decision wouldn't be made based on spreadsheets and engineering reports. It would be made based on trust, vision, and the belief that some opportunities were worth pursuing even when the outcome was uncertain. Marcus had built his life around providing security for Emma, but maybe it was time to show her that calculated risks could lead to extraordinary rewards, that families could expand in beautiful ways when approached with open hearts and honest intentions. That success wasn't just about protecting what you had, but about building something better than you'd ever imagined possible. The recital hall at the Hartwell Academy was packed with parents, grandparents, and siblings, all dressed in their finest clothes for what the program described as an evening of young musicians. Marcus adjusted his tie for the third time, still not entirely comfortable in formal wear, but determined to look presentable for Emma's big night. "You look very handsome," Victoria said, appearing beside him in an elegant black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, but somehow managed to look understated rather than showy. "Emma's going to be so proud. Where's David?" Marcus asked, scanning the crowd for his daughter's biological father. "Parking the car," Victoria said. "He's more nervous than Emma is. You'd think he was the one performing tonight." Marcus smiled. At that, over the past month, David had attended every one of Emma's practice sessions that his schedule allowed, sitting quietly in the corner while she worked through her pieces. He'd never offered advice or tried to take over. He simply wanted to understand this part of Emma's life that brought her so much joy. "There he is," Victoria said, nodding toward the entrance. David hurried into the hall, slightly out of breath and looking around anxiously until he spotted them. He'd traded his usual business suits for dark slacks and a navy blazer, making an obvious effort to blend in rather than stand out. "Sorry I'm late," David said, joining them. "Traffic was heavier than I expected. Have I missed anything?" "Just the pre-show chaos," Marcus said. "Emma's backstage with the other kids, probably bouncing off the walls with excitement." "She's been practicing her piece obsessively," David said. "Yesterday she played it 12 times in a row until she got the third measure exactly right." Marcus felt a warm surge of pride mixed with something deeper. David had been paying attention to the details that mattered to Emma, learning her perfectionist tendencies and understanding what drove her to excel. It was the kind of observation that only came from genuine engagement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Patterson's voice came over the sound system. "Please take your seats. Our young musicians are ready to share their hard work with you this evening." They found seats in the fourth row, close enough to see Emma clearly when her turn came, but not so close that their presence might make her nervous. Marcus had learned through experience that Emma performed better when she could see him, but not feel like he was scrutinizing every note. The program began with the youngest students, 5- and 6-year-olds, playing simplified arrangements with the intense concentration that children brought to important tasks. Marcus found himself genuinely moved by their earnest efforts, remembering Emma's first tentative attempts at the violin 2 years ago. "She's come so far," Victoria whispered, reading his thoughts. "She has," Marcus agreed. "I wasn't sure she'd stick with it at first." The violin is not an easy instrument for a 4-year-old. What made you choose violin? David asked quietly. Emma chose it, Marcus said. We went to a music store to look at instruments, and she went straight to the violins. Said they sounded like angels singing. David smiled at that, another piece of Emma's history filling in the gaps of his understanding. Marcus had been sharing these stories more freely lately, recognizing that David's genuine interest wasn't threatening to his own relationship with Emma, it was enhancing it. Next, we have Emma Chun performing Bach's Minuet in G major. Mrs. Patterson announced. Emma walked onto the small stage with poise that belied her 6 years, her violin and bow held properly as Mrs. Patterson had taught her. She was wearing the navy blue dress that Marcus had bought specially for the recital, her hair pulled back with the silver clips that had been Sarah's favorites. She positioned herself at the center of the stage, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes filled the hall with a clarity and precision that surprised even Marcus. Emma had been practicing diligently, but hearing her perform in the acoustically perfect recital hall was different from listening to her practice at home. The music soared and danced, each phrase building on the last with the mathematical precision that made Bach's compositions timeless. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes as he watched his daughter pour her heart into the performance. This wasn't just a school recital, it was Emma announcing to the world that she was serious about music, that she understood its power and was committed to mastering it. Beside him, David was equally transfixed. His hands were clenched in his lap, and Marcus could see him mouthing along with the melody as if he'd memorized every note along with Emma. Victoria had her phone out, recording the performance with the focus of a professional documentarian. When Emma finished the final phrase, the hall erupted in applause. She smiled broadly and took a proper bow, just as Mrs. Patterson had taught her, before walking off the stage with the same poise she'd shown entering. That was incredible, David said, his voice thick with emotion. She's really talented. She gets it from Sarah, Marcus said. Sarah played piano. I think Emma inherited her musical ear. And her determination from you, Victoria added. That level of precision doesn't happen without practice and persistence. The rest of the recital passed in a blur of proud parents and young musicians, but Marcus found his attention drifting to the 2 people sitting beside him. 3 months ago, he'd been a single father attending these events alone, proud but sometimes lonely in his isolation. Tonight, he was part of something larger, a family that defied conventional definitions, but felt more complete than anything he'd experienced before. After the formal program ended, there was a reception in the academy's lobby. Emma found them immediately, practically vibrating with excitement about her performance. Did you hear how I got the hard part right? She asked, bouncing on her toes. The part where the notes go really high and then really low? Every note was perfect, Marcus said, kneeling to her level. I'm so proud of you. You sounded like a professional musician, David added, and Emma beamed at the compliment. Mrs. Patterson says I'm ready for more advanced pieces, Emma said. She wants to know if I can practice more during the week. Marcus felt a familiar pang of worry about logistics. More practice time meant more driving to lessons, more scheduling complications with his work commitments. But before he could respond, Victoria spoke up. What if you practiced at our house sometimes, she suggested. We have a piano, and I could help you with the musical parts while you work on violin technique. Really? Emma's eyes widened with excitement. You'd do that? I'd love to, Victoria said. Music is always better when it's shared. Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions. On one hand, Victoria's offer would solve practical problems and give Emma access to musical resources he couldn't provide. On the other hand, it represented another step toward integrating their lives in ways that sometimes made him feel like he was losing control. Can we, Dad? Emma asked, looking up at him with hopeful eyes. We'll work something out, Marcus said carefully. Maybe 1 or 2 afternoons a week. Perfect, Victoria said. And David, you could join us. Emma could teach you what she's learning. David looked genuinely touched by the suggestion. I'd like that very much. As they talked, Marcus noticed Richard Blackwood approaching their group with obvious reluctance. The arrogant CEO who'd mocked Marcus's truck 3 months ago now looked like a man preparing for an unpleasant but necessary conversation. Marcus, Blackwood said, his tone carefully neutral. Congratulations on Emma's performance. She's very talented. Thank you, Marcus replied, studying Blackwood's face for signs of the condescension that had characterized their previous interaction. I was hoping I might have a word with you, Blackwood continued, and with Victoria, if she's willing. Victoria's expression cooled noticeably. What can we do for you, Richard? I wanted to apologize, Blackwood said, the words clearly difficult. For him, my behavior at the academy was inexcusable. I made assumptions based on superficial observations, and I was completely wrong. Yes, you were, Victoria said bluntly. I've done some research since then, Blackwood continued, looking directly at Marcus. I know about Chun and Associates' reputation, about the projects you've completed, about your standing in the construction industry. I should have shown you the respect you deserved from the beginning. Marcus found himself in the unusual position of watching a powerful man humble himself publicly. It wasn't entirely comfortable, but there was something satisfying about seeing Blackwood acknowledge his mistakes. Apology accepted, Marcus said simply. I hope this means Pinnacle Financial might be considered for future investment opportunities. Blackwood said, turning to Victoria with obvious hope. Richard, Victoria said, her tone matter of fact, we choose our business partners based on character as much as competence. Your behavior toward Marcus revealed something about your character that can't be fixed with research and apologies. Blackwood's face reddened. One conversation shouldn't define an entire professional relationship. It wasn't just one conversation. Victoria replied. It was a demonstration of how you treat people you perceive as having less status than you. That's exactly the kind of judgment we use to evaluate potential partners. Marcus watched Blackwood struggle with the realization that his prejudices had cost him a lucrative business relationship. There was a part of him that felt sympathy for the man's professional disappointment, but a larger part that felt vindicated by the consequences of Blackwood's arrogance. I understand, Blackwood said finally. I hope I can learn from this experience. He walked away, leaving their group at a moment of awkward silence. Emma, who had been listening to this exchange with the intense focus children brought to adult drama, spoke up with characteristic directness. Why was that man mean to you before? Dad, he made assumptions about me based on our truck, Marcus explained. He thought because it wasn't fancy, that meant I wasn't successful. That's silly, Emma said matter-of-factly. Our truck works fine, and you build amazing things. Some people judge others by the wrong things, David said. They look at what people own instead of what they accomplish. Or how they treat other people, Victoria added, which is much more important than what car they drive. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for the way Victoria and David handled Emma's questions, turning a potentially uncomfortable moment into a teaching opportunity about values and character. Speaking of accomplishments, Victoria said, changing the subject smoothly, have you made a decision about the Riverside project? Marcus had been wrestling with the decision for weeks, weighing the opportunities against the risks. But watching Emma perform tonight, seeing her confidence and skill, had clarified something important for him. I want to do it, he said. Chun and Associates will take on the Riverside development. Victoria's face lit up with genuine pleasure. That's wonderful news. When can we start the planning process? Next week, Marcus said. I've been interviewing project managers and lining up subcontractors. We'll need to expand the team significantly, but I think we can handle it. What's the Riverside project? Emma asked. Your dad is going to build a whole neighborhood, David explained. Homes for families, stores for shopping, parks for playing. An entire community. Cool, Emma said. Can I help? You can definitely visit the construction site, Marcus said. And maybe help with some of the planning. Will there be a place for kids to practice music? Emma asked. Marcus looked at Victoria, who was smiling broadly. Actually, that's not a bad idea. A community center with practice rooms and performance space. We could add that to the design, Victoria said. A cultural hub for the neighborhood. Marcus felt a familiar excitement building as he thought about the possibilities. This wasn't just a construction project. It was an opportunity to create something meaningful, something that would serve families like his own for generations. As the reception wound down and people began heading home, Marcus found himself reflecting on the extraordinary changes in his life over the past 3 months. He'd gone from being a single father focused on survival to being part of an extended family with resources and opportunities he'd never imagined. Dad, Emma said as they walked to the parking lot, this was the best recital ever. Because you played so beautifully, Marcus said. No, Emma said seriously, because everyone I love was there to hear it. Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. Emma's simple statement captured everything that mattered about their evolving family structure. It wasn't about money or status or conventional arrangements. It was about love and support and showing up for the people who mattered. Same time next year? David asked as they reached their cars. Wouldn't miss it, Marcus said, and met it. As they drove home in the truck, Emma chattering about her performance and her plans for future recitals, Marcus thought about the conversation he'd had with himself 6 months ago. He'd been a man focused on protecting what he had, afraid that any change might threaten the careful stability he'd built for his daughter. Now, he was a man preparing to take the biggest professional risk of his career, supported by a family that had formed in ways he never could have predicted. Emma had 2 parents who loved her unconditionally, a stepmother who understood the value of hard work and artistic achievement, and a future full of possibilities that extended far beyond anything Marcus could have provided alone. The truck wheezed to life on the second try. Its familiar sounds no longer a source of embarrassment, but a reminder of all the places it had taken them and all the adventures still to come. Some things were worth keeping exactly as they were, Marcus realized, even when everything else was changing. Dad, Emma said as they pulled into their driveway, I love our family. All of it? Marcus asked. All of it, Emma confirmed, even the complicated parts. Marcus smiled as he helped his daughter out of the truck, gathering her violin case and his own scattered thoughts about the future. Tomorrow he would start the detailed planning for the Riverside project, begin the process of transforming his small construction company into something larger and more ambitious. But tonight he was simply a father who had watched his daughter shine on stage, surrounded by people who loved her and supported her dreams. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and opportunities in equal measure. But for the first time in years, Marcus wasn't facing it alone. He was part of something larger than himself, something that had formed through coincidence and grown through choice, something that proved families could be created in the most unexpected ways when people approached each other with open hearts and honest intentions. As they walked toward the house, Emma's hand in his, Marcus realized that the story he'd been telling himself about their life had been too small. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving, building something beautiful and complicated and absolutely worth every risk they'd taken to get here. 1 year later, Marcus stood on the construction platform overlooking the riverside development, watching the final phases of the most ambitious project of his career take shape. What had once been 15 acres of abandoned warehouses and contaminated soil was now becoming a vibrant community of affordable housing, retail spaces and green areas that would serve working families for generations. The community center is ahead of schedule, his new project manager, Sarah Kim, reported as she joined him on the platform. The music practice rooms will be ready for installation next week. Marcus smiled at the mention of the practice rooms. Emma had insisted that the community center include spaces where kids could learn instruments, and Victoria had enthusiastically supported the addition. It had become a symbol of how their personal lives had influenced their professional collaboration. "Any word from the city inspector?" Marcus asked. "Clean bill of health on all the residential units," Sarah confirmed. "Building permits for Phase 3 should be approved by Friday." Chun and Associates had grown from 12 employees to 38 in the past year, with Marcus hiring carefully selected professionals who shared his commitment to quality, workmanship, and community-focused development. The Riverside project had established them as a major player in sustainable urban development. "With 3 more projects already lined up for the following year, Mr. Chun?" A young voice called from below. Marcus looked down to see Emma climbing the construction stairs, wearing a hard hat that was comically large for her 7-year-old head. "What are you doing here, kiddo?" Marcus asked as Emma reached the platform. "David brought me to see the music rooms," Emma said. "He said they installed the soundproofing today." Marcus looked around and spotted David near the community center entrance, also wearing a hard hat and talking animatedly with one of the acoustic engineers. Over the past year, David had become genuinely involved in the construction process, asking detailed questions and learning about building techniques with the enthusiasm of someone discovering a new passion. "The practice rooms are going to be amazing," Emma continued. "Mrs. Patterson says she might bring some of her students here for group lessons." "That's the idea," Marcus said. "Music should be accessible to everyone, not just kids whose parents can afford private academies. Like we used to be," Emma said matter-of-factly. Marcus felt a familiar mix of pride and amazement at his daughter's perceptive understanding of their journey. Emma had adapted to their changed circumstances with remarkable grace, never taking their new opportunities for granted while maintaining appreciation for what they'd had before. "Dad, look what came in the mail," Emma said, pulling a thick envelope from her backpack. Marcus recognized the letterhead immediately, Hartwell Academy of Fine Arts. His heart sank slightly, assuming it was promotional material for some expensive program they couldn't afford despite their improved circumstances. "It's a scholarship offer," Emma announced, as if reading his thoughts, "for their advanced music program. Full tuition for 3 years. Marcus took the letter with trembling hands, scanning the formal language that confirmed Emma's acceptance into one of the most prestigious young musician programs in the region. At the bottom of the letter, a handwritten note caught his attention. Emma's dedication and natural talent make her an exceptional candidate for advanced musical education. We're honored to support her continued development. Victoria Ashford. Board of Directors. "Victoria arranged this?" Marcus asked. "She said you might be proud but stubborn about accepting help," Emma replied. "So she made it official. Now you can't say no." Marcus laughed despite himself. Victoria had learned to navigate his independent streak with strategic patience, finding ways to support Emma's development that felt like opportunities rather than charity. "What do you think about advanced music classes?" Marcus asked Emma. "I think I want to learn everything," Emma said seriously. "Mrs. Patterson says I could maybe play with the Youth Symphony next year if I keep improving." Marcus felt his chest swell with pride. Emma's musical abilities had flourished over the past year, nurtured by regular lessons with Mrs. Patterson, practice sessions with Victoria, and encouragement from David, who had discovered his own appreciation for classical music through his daughter's passion. "Speaking of David," Marcus said, "where did he disappear to?" "He's talking to the engineer about acoustic design," Emma said. "He's getting really good at construction talk." It was true. David had thrown himself into understanding the building process with the same intensity he brought to financial analysis. He'd spent weekends on construction sites, asked endless questions about materials and techniques, and even enrolled in a weekend course on sustainable building practices. He says he wants to understand how things get built so he can make better decisions about financing them, Emma continued. Victoria thinks it's cute how excited he gets about concrete and steel beams. Marcus found himself genuinely amused by David's transformation from nervous, absent father to engaged family member with passionate interests in both music and construction. Their relationship had evolved from cautious cooperation to genuine friendship, built on shared commitment to TOEFL, Emma's welfare and mutual respect for each other's strengths. Emma, Victoria's voice carried across the construction site. Come see the music room acoustics. Emma bounded toward the community center with the boundless energy of childhood, leaving Marcus alone on the platform to contemplate the view. The riverside development sprawled below him, a testament to what could be accomplished when vision met determination and resources aligned with values. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Marcus, this is Richard Blackwood. I wanted you to know that I've been following the Riverside project in the business press. It's extraordinary work. I hope someday I'll have the opportunity to support developments like this. Congratulations. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it without responding. Some bridges once burned weren't worth rebuilding. Blackwood's professional humility came too late to matter, and Marcus had learned the importance of surrounding himself with people who shared his values from the beginning rather than those who had to learn them through consequences. Dad, Emma's voice echoed from inside the community center. You have to hear how my violin sounds in here. Marcus made his way down from the platform and into the building, following the sound of Emma tuning her violin in one of the practice rooms. The space was beautifully designed, with warm wood paneling and carefully calculated acoustics that would make any instrument sound its best. Emma launched into a complex piece that Marcus didn't recognize, her bow dancing across the strings with confidence that had developed through months of dedicated practice and excellent instruction. The music filled the room with crystalline clarity, each note perfectly articulated and emotionally expressive. When she finished, the small audience of construction workers, engineers, and family members burst into spontaneous applause. Emma beamed with pleasure, clearly understanding that she'd just christened the space with its first real musical performance. That was beautiful, sweetheart, David said, his voice thick with emotion. What piece was that? Bach's Partita in D minor, Emma said proudly. It's really hard, but Mrs. Patterson says I'm ready for it. You certainly are, Victoria agreed. That's conservatory-level repertoire. Marcus felt a familiar surge of amazement at his daughter's rapid musical development. With access to excellent instruction, quality instruments, and supportive family members who valued artistic achievement, Emma was blooming in ways that might never have been possible in their previous circumstances. The acoustics in here are perfect, Emma continued. Kids are going to love practicing in this space. That was the idea, Marcus said. Music shouldn't be a luxury that only wealthy families can afford. Like we're helping other kids have what I have now, Emma said, her 7-year-old wisdom cutting straight to the heart of the matter. As they prepared to leave the construction site, Marcus took one last look around the community center. Tomorrow, crews would begin installing the final fixtures and finishing details. In 6 weeks, the first families would move into their new homes. In 3 months, the community center would host its grand opening with a concert featuring young musicians from across the city. The project had exceeded every expectation, coming in on time and under budget while achieving environmental certifications that established new standards for sustainable development. More importantly, it had proven that affordable housing could be beautiful, that sustainable building practices could be cost-effective, and that communities could be designed to serve families rather than just generate profits. Marcus, Victoria said as they walked toward the parking area, David and I have been talking about expanding the Riverside model to other cities. Would Chun and Associates be interested in taking on projects in Sacramento and Portland? Marcus felt his pulse quicken at the suggestion. Multi-city expansion would transform his company from a regional contractor to a national leader in sustainable community development. It would also mean more travel, more complexity, and more opportunities to impact thousands of families across the country. "Let me think about it," Marcus said, though his mind was already racing through the possibilities. "Take your time," Victoria said. "But I should mention that 3 other developers have contacted us about similar projects. The Riverside model is attracting national attention." As they reached their vehicles, Marcus noticed that his truck looked somehow different parked next to Victoria's Rolls-Royce and David's Tesla. It was still the same weathered pickup that had carried him and Emma through years of challenges and adventures, but now it seemed less like a symbol of limitation and more like a badge of authenticity. "Dad," Emma said as they climbed into the truck, "are we rich now?" The question caught Marcus off guard. Their financial situation had certainly improved dramatically over the past year, with the Riverside project generating substantial profits and future contracts promising continued growth. But wealth felt like the wrong word for what they'd gained. "We're comfortable," Marcus said carefully, "and we're very lucky to have opportunities to do meaningful work. But we're not going to get fancy and forget where we came from, right?" Emma asked seriously. "Never," Marcus promised. "This truck is staying exactly as it is." "Good," Emma said with satisfaction. "I like our truck. It has character." As they drove home through neighborhoods that Marcus had helped revitalize over the years, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them to this point. A chance encounter at a music academy, a moment of casual cruelty from an arrogant CEO, and the unexpected intervention of a billionaire with genuine values had transformed not just their family structure, but their entire trajectory in life. The irony wasn't lost on him that Richard Blackwood's condescension about the truck had indirectly led to the most successful period of Marcus's career. Sometimes the worst moments created opportunities for the best outcomes. As long as you were surrounded by people who recognized your worth, regardless of surface appearances. "Dad," Emma said as they pulled into their driveway, "I'm glad everything happened the way it did. Even the complicated parts?" Marcus asked, echoing their conversation from a year ago. "Especially the complicated parts," Emma said firmly. "Easy. Things don't make good stories." Marcus smiled at his daughter's growing wisdom. Emma was right. Their story had become something remarkable precisely because it had required courage, trust, and the willingness to embrace uncertainty in pursuit of something better. As they walked toward the house, Marcus realized that the success of the Riverside project and the expansion of Chun and Associates were satisfying, but they weren't the real victories. The real victory was Emma's confidence in her own potential. Her understanding of family as something that could be chosen and built rather than just inherited, and her belief that hard work and good character were more valuable than any material possession. The future stretched ahead of them, full of new projects, musical performances, and adventures that would test and strengthen the bonds they'd forged over the past year. But Marcus no longer approached the future with anxiety about protecting what they had. Instead, he looked forward with excitement about what they might build together. That evening, as Emma practiced violin in her room and the sounds of Bach drifted through the house, Marcus sat at his kitchen table reviewing plans for the Sacramento project. The work was challenging and the stakes were high, but he was no longer facing it alone. He was part of a family that had been created through courage and choice, supported by people who valued his contributions and shared his commitment to building communities that served working families. The weathered pickup truck sat in the driveway, ready for whatever adventures tomorrow might bring. Some things, Marcus had learned, were worth keeping exactly as they were, even when everything else was changing for the better. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.